Happy Tuesday. It's Brian Davis here, co-founder of Spark Rental, and I am so pumped to be hosting Abhi Golhar of the Think Realty podcast. He's the host there. He's also a national speaker and entrepreneurship coach. He has an enormous real estate portfolio, and he is going to take us behind the scenes in his real estate investing business today, give you all the tips, tricks, and hacks. So on that note, welcome, Abhi. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks so much, man. I'm super excited to go through the barrage of questions that you and some of the readers of your newsletter have asked. So, dude, bring it. Let's make it happen, man. I'm so excited. I cannot wait to do it.
Well, good. Here we go. I'm going to dive right in. Let's rewind the clock all the way to the beginning, and let's talk about your first real estate deal that you ever did. So where was it? How much did you spend on it? How did you fund it? What are the terrible mistakes that you made? Tell us all about it.
I hated that deal so much. Well, let me just say, I never make any mistakes. I'm a perfect pro all the time. And just like what you see on HGTV, that's my life. The most perfect. I'm a prince. Did you not know that? Like you need to up your royalty game here, Brian.
Hey, what is this? A first date?
No, so listen. Everybody goes to the school of hard knocks. Everybody goes through the school of hard knocks. If you're listening to this and you're a pro and you're like, no, I don't know what school of hard knocks is talking about. First of all, you're full of it, okay? Because you probably made as many mistakes, if not more mistakes, than you need to. But listen, if you're new and you're listening to this for the first time, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to suck at something. You're going to screw up somewhere, and it's okay. My first deal was in Detroit. How did I fund it? It's kind of a longer story, but we've got a little time. So when I went to the University of Michigan, finished my 4-year degree in electrical engineering from 2002 to 2006. In 2002, my first semester, are you familiar with the Square Root Club? Do you know what the Square Root Club is? So my academics were so bad. I was part of the Square Root Club, and the only way that you join the Square Root Club is when if you square root a number that's lower than your actual GPA. So that was ridiculous. So the only way that works is my GPA was lower than it was like 0.98, like my first semester, because I came in with a chip on my shoulder. I'm like, yeah, of course, I dominated high school. Dude, I was so bored in high school. I started a computer repair business. I was dual enrolled at a community college and my dad's college, where he was a professor he's still a professor there at Western. And I was doing international and the IB and AP classes, and I was still playing soccer. I was beyond bored in high school. I'm like, this is not even challenging. Let me go do something else. And so here I am. I walk into Michigan, arguably one of the hardest engineering colleges in the world. Yep. And I'm like, wow, I got this. Nope. Part of the Square Root Club. Square Root GPA is higher than your GPA. And I got to a point where this is like I had my Motorola V600 cell phone, and it's like a flip phone, and it had like the lights on the outside. You know what I'm talking about.
I do.
And my buddy Tommy calls me, and he's like, Tommy, if you're listening, dude, you changed my life, man. So he calls me and he knocks on my, I'm trying to find something to knock on, right? He knocks on my dorm room door, and here I am. I'm like curled up in a corner, like, hold on. I'm like this. This is me. I'm like in my dorm room, and I'm like this. I'm just sitting here like this, like kind of reading a book, looking at I don't know, some magazine, or maybe I was studying for a class, and I'm like literally kind of like shivering. I'm like right here. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? I hadn't come out of my room for days. Okay, I'm coming back now. I hadn't come out of my room for days. I hadn't eaten. I looked like shit. I felt like shit. And he's like, hey, I'm going to give you a lot of books. One of the books is Think and Grow Rich, Acres of Diamonds, Rich Dad Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant. And I read all those books, the classics, right? Like, you have to read the classics. And that got me thinking. That got my entrepreneurial drive back a little bit. And it finally came to meeting two mentors. The first mentor taught me everything about entrepreneurship that I wanted to learn. The second mentor did not. In fact, he was probably the greatest gift, but also the greatest curse that I had going through my engineering college. So first mentor, we'll call him Mike. He taught me how to buy and sell cars on eBay. I would go to, you can do this right now. You can go to Search Tempest or Craigslist, for sale Craigslist, and find cars and trucks for sale and find like old classic cars. We would put a purchase agreement on those classic cars with an exclusive marketing clause. So we would only market the cars on eBay. We would actually never transfer title to our own names or anything. Do it in college.
Like wholesaling cars.
Yeah. For a period of 3 years in college, I was selling, we bought and sold like 8 to 10 cars a month. And the average margin we would make per car was like $7,000 to $8,000. So think about those numbers for a second. That's insane.
That's great numbers.
Yeah. And I'm like sitting here doing a full load of engineering classes. I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, why do I even care? So anyway, long story short, I actually did finish my engineering degree. But during the process, like my sophomore, junior year, I read all these books and I kept reading, like One Up on Wall Street by Peter Lynch, and just every single book. I was reading outside of my academic curriculum. I was probably reading a book a week, and I still read a book a week, just nonfiction, straight nonfiction. Right now I'm finishing up Principles by Ray Dalio for the third time. I've read that book. It's an incredible book. So here I am. I have a little bit of cash set aside, and I look to a mentor who's going to teach me how to invest in real estate. I said, great, not a big deal. Come to find out, this guy was a complete fraud. But that's not the best part of the story. Best part of the story is it's sophomore year. It's junior. I think it's sophomore year. It's fall time in Ann Arbor. And if you're not familiar with the weather in the state of Michigan, it's absolutely crazy. Sometimes it's raining. Sometimes it's sleet, hail, and snow. And I get a call on my Motorola V600 flip phone from my contractor. And he's like, hey, bro, hey man, we got a problem with your property in inner city Detroit. You need to go check it out. I'm like, well, hey, you're the contractor. You're supposed to fix this thing. What's going on? So anyway, I drive after classes. It's like 9 p.m. I drive to inner city Detroit. By the time I get there, it's a full-on blizzard. I can't see anything. I run over the mailbox, hanging a left turn into my driveway. I walk into the family room. I see a shop vac and I hear running water. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Now I know what a shop vac's for. But when you meet me in person, I'm 5'5", 120 pounds, and I'm the best white collar worker there is. Like, I look at a sledgehammer, I'm like, I'm not going to pick that up. I go to the gym exclusively to like do 5-pound curls because they're not 10 pounds. Like, I'm always doing things at a discount, or like cutting corners somewhere if I can. So I'm like, I'm just not going to do this work. But my mentor number one, Mike, taught me, hey, if you're in need of help, ask for help. So I go outside, and what do you not do in inner city Detroit at 10:30 at night? Knock on doors asking for help, especially if you're a short brown dude. And so here I am, inner city Detroit. I knock on a few doors, and you get the not that door. This is not like the trick that I'm looking for on a Halloween night. And so anyway, I eventually find a neighbor, and he comes over. We start moving as much water out of the basement where it was flooded up to my eyeballs as we could. We couldn't get any water out. And so I make my next move, which is to the liquor store. And Jack Daniels and I have a really intense conversation that night. I go upstairs to the second floor, and I fall asleep there knowing that I'm alone, I'm wet, I'm cold. I have no family support because my mom and dad had no idea what I was doing at the time. My brother hated me. My peers were like, what the F? You're supposed to be in class and studying. I had a reputation of not completing my assignments and homework on time. I wasn't a good like group member. But for me, I was just beyond academics at that point. I didn't really care. Not to say that if you're in school, you shouldn't pay attention. You should absolutely pay attention. But like I'd gotten to the point where it just didn't matter. And I was failing. And for the first time, I felt alone, like truly, truly alone, with no support. And that deal, like I had a little bit of cash from the buying, selling cars. I got into a really big deal. I was trying to renovate the house, and I ended up having to just wholesale the house to somebody else. They took over payments. They finished it. They made a killing. And here I am, tail between my legs, going to class the next day.
Did you lose money on the deal?
I did. I lost about a couple $1,000. It was like $5,000 or $6,000.
Which, when you're in college, is a lot of money. I mean,
Dude,
it's a lot of money for adults too, but it's a ton of money when you're in college.
Yeah, it really was. And that was outside of my academic failures, this was also like a real world failure. And I'm like, how do you trust people? Because I have a major trust problem, still do. How do you trust the business partners, right? Number one. Number two, how do you trust the people that are going to do the work for you? How do you trust that it's a good deal? How do you trust the market? Like, how do you do that? Like, how do you do that? And when you're 18 or 19, who are you going to talk to? Some bullshit dude or dudette that's going to give you like a $25,000 course on flipping real estate, or you'll get inspired by watching HGTV or YouTube videos. No, that's not what you do. You actually have to be in the shit and deal with it. And that's when you learn. And unfortunately, I was dealt shit at a very young age. So as much as I created my own hell in that moment, I ultimately realized it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. The trials and tribulations, exceptional, looking back.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that I've learned about real estate investing, is that it's a team sport. You can't go it alone. You need help.
Yeah.
From a realtor to property managers to a whole slew of contractors to mentors and partners, and you need help across the board. And when you try to go it alone, you end up by yourself in the hood with a bottle of Jack Daniels with a flooded house. You know what I mean? Like,
no, really, it was like a handle. I probably shouldn't have driven to class that day, right? Like, I should have walked it off. That's the truth. There's no I in team. And once you figure that out, then rule number one, go find yourself a damn good team. Rule number two, hold on to that team.
Absolutely. Well, so tell us about, how you scaled from there. What did you start doing differently? What changed in your investing from that first terrible deal that was such a nightmare?
I realized that I needed to get OCD. Like, I needed to really understand numbers. So if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I don't know a P&L from anything. I don't even know what a P&L is. Well, I'll tell you what, go to Google, get off your lazy ass, and go learn this stuff. If you don't understand how to use technology, you're going to lose the game. It's that simple. Like, for me, it was a combination of a couple of things. Number one, understanding deal sources and deal flow. Number two, understanding how to talk to people. Number three, understanding the numbers. And number four, learning how to use technology to grow and scale. If you're 75 or 80 years old, if you're in your mid 40s or late 40s or 50s or like in your 30s, and you're like, well, how do I do this in real estate? Use technology to grow in real estate. Guess what? You're going to be passed over by opportunities, and Lady Luck is just not going to see you, have you see your day, because you need to understand the power of technology and the power of what Brian built in Spark Rental to really help you grow.
Appreciate the plug.
Yeah, no, I'm not even kidding. Like, I've looked at it. I've created a login. I mean, every program has its pros and cons, but like, I'm seeing nothing but pros. And listen, I love single family rentals, and I don't manage my own stuff, but when I did, I needed the support of technology, and I didn't have it back then. I didn't have a Spark Rental back then, So anyway, those are the four things that shifted my thinking. And this also applies to businesses and real estate, because in my world, I invest in businesses and I use the K1s, the passive K1s, to go invest in real estate, either as an LP, or I rarely operate myself anymore. But like, whether it's a multifamily limited partnership or if it's some kind of deal that I'm getting into with somebody else, that's going to be the foundational core support of long-term wealth building. Because real estate, for me, I might say something controversial on your show, but for me, real estate is the slowest way to build wealth there is, but it is the strongest way to build wealth. Building businesses get you cash flow and gets you there quicker with money in bank, but you need now a place to put that, and then you need somebody else to run the business. Thankfully, I'm in a position where I don't have to do both.
So with these, so you're finding partners out there, like boots on the ground real estate investors, and you're basically serving as the money guy. You are not out there sourcing deals or overseeing renovations or managing apartment complexes. You're not doing any of that, from what I gathered.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're partnering with guys who are out there on the ground doing this stuff day in and day out, and you're really providing the funding for it.
You got it. Yep. And so the flow of money looks very simple. Let's say, I'll use you as an example. Let's say Spark Rental, like how much do you charge for Spark Rental? What's the monthly? Is there a monthly?
There is no monthly as of right now anyway. It's free.
Okay, cool. So let's say you make, I don't know, let's say make $250,000 in Spark Rental a year, right? With sponsorships and podcasts and stuff, and then the software. So you're making $250,000 a year, and you don't have to use any of that. Let's say you have a full-time job, you're doing Spark Rental on the side, and all the Spark Rental income for you is just, hey, kind of free cash flow after you pay taxes. What I would do is I'd take all of that and push it into a real estate deal. So the same thing that I do is I look for businesses to buy that are already creating cash flow and have a high enough EBITDA. And I'll take a portion of that EBITDA and start pushing it. I mean, yeah, you have to pay taxes. You can't shelter taxes. That's like the dumbest thing in the world. You can get creative, go find yourself a good CPA, but you take 6 figures, you take $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 a year, and you start moving it into real estate investments. I don't care if it's a single family home in Birmingham. Like, I love college football teams. And I'm not like, I'm a Michigan guy through and through, but go Buckeyes I don't care. Like, I was recently speaking at an HR event, and I said, hey, how many of you have kids that go to Ohio State University? And they're like, yeah, whatever. And they all knew I was a Michigan guy, so I was getting a lot of shit for it anyway. And I just said, hey, thanks for paying your rent on time, illustrating that real estate never lies, and the fact that you can get income every single month from that, but you have a business, you have your main business, a Spark Rental that's funneling the acquisition of real estate opportunities. That's the sweetest thing in the whole wide world.
Yeah. So, for you guys listening, Abhi and I were talking before the show, he made a similar point. He said, real estate, it's a slow way to build wealth, but it's a strong way to build wealth. And how, it's a slow and steady way to do it, but it is somewhat predictable. And real estate investing is one of the few investments in the world where you can very accurately predict your cash flow in the long term. I mean, not on a month-to-month basis. One month you might have a $5,000 furnace bill or whatever, but you can predict your cash flow in real estate, and you can predict your returns in real estate in a way that you can't necessarily elsewhere. And starting a business, there's a much faster and higher upside potential there. It also comes with some more risk, whereas real estate grounds your returns in something that's physical in the real world. So anyway, just wanted to clarify that point there. And
if you're young and you're in your 20s, go start a business. Like, what are you doing just listening to information? Like, go find like a Shopify store idea. Like, Shopify store owners right now, like, you can buy their stuff for like $100,000 or $200,000. You can buy the entire store, and they don't know how to manage it. They also don't know how to value the business because they're just not savvy business owners. That's opportunity right there. Or like, maybe partner with them or figure out some way to make it work, and then use that cash flow and start buying real estate. There's zero excuse in today's world. Zero.
Yeah, and when you're young, you do have a higher risk tolerance. Especially when you're not married, you don't have kids. You can go out there and start an online business or an in-person business. And if it doesn't work out the way you want it to, maybe you didn't risk the farm, right? I mean, you can always go back and get another job. You can always go start other businesses. So when you're young, take advantage of that freedom, because the older you get, the less your risk tolerance becomes. So, take some shots while you're young. If they miss, it's not the end of the world.
Totally. I mean, you and I are in our late 30s, right? When I look at risk now, it's definitely like the strategy has shifted, right? I look at now, the first part of the equation is getting rich. The second part of the equation is staying rich. So the question is, how do I effectively do the latter? And how do I also continue to do the former? And the former really comes down to a couple of things, right? It's like you need the right team. You need to be You need to be religiously OCD about the numbers in your deal.
Yeah.
You need to understand the people that are operating your deal. And if you're going to get in bed with them, great. Have an exit clause. Like you understand, have what exit means in the operating agreement of your entity. And if something goes wrong, hey, at least you can protect yourself. You have a parachute. And now it's just a matter of finding deals that make sense, whether it's real estate or otherwise.
Absolutely. So, let's turn a corner here for 1 second. I
Sure.
want to hear, because we're nearing the end of 2021. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on where the real estate industry is headed in 2022. And that could be, real estate markets. I mean, obviously they've been very hot in 2021. It could be, changes in technology, industry-wide kind of stuff. However you want to answer that question, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about where you see real estate heading in 2022.
Yeah, rates are going to go up. Supply and demand, it's probably not going to ease up until late next year. I can't see it easing up until late next year. Earlier this year, the average days on market was less than a month. It's like 0.6 months. NAR, National Association of Realtors. Yeah, it was nuts, right? Yeah. A balanced market, for those of you that are new, is roughly about 6 months. So it should take roughly about 6 months to sell your house. Anything less than that is insane. Like when you have what's the big who's the big home builder? My God, Lennar. When you have Lennar Homes selling $50,000 or $75,000 above asking price, they're cheaply built crap homes selling $50,000 to $75,000 above. Something's wrong, right? Like then you wonder, wait a minute, it's not something's wrong. It's just there's not enough supply to meet the demand, and when that happens, then there's a really big clash. Prices go up, and then everybody thinks, well, I can make a lot of money in real estate. Well, it's easy right now if you're a drooling idiot to make money in real estate because real estate's on the up and up. But do I expect a major correction? No. People will talk about, oh, well, there's shadow inventory on the market and all these pending foreclosures. So
it hasn't really happened.
Yeah, and even if you took all of the pre foreclosures that are supposedly coming in the next months, you throw that all on the market. Sure, it might increase the days on market from, I think, maybe 2 months where we are now, maybe 1.8, 2 months to where we are now, to like maybe 3 months. So great, all those will be absorbed because there's demand to buy that supply.
Yeah, and all of those homeowners would then become renters and fuel the rental market in that case.
Yeah, I mean, and let's be honest, we're renting the American dream. We're no longer owning it. I had one of my before I did the Think Realty podcast, we had the Think Realty radio show. It was a nationally syndicated radio show on the Wall Street Business Network. We were in 53 cities nationwide. And I remember even then, 3 years ago, talking about this concept of, wait a minute, we're renting the American dream. We don't have to buy it anymore. And in some instances, it makes more sense to rent than buy.
I rent.
Maybe some
I'm a landlord and I still rent my own residence.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, I think Grant Cardone does the same thing, right? He's like, just I rent. What are you talking about? Something else to consider too is when I'm looking at buying homes, and I've said this for now years, when I look at buying single family rental or even multifamily, I'm not looking at primary markets. Why?
Because they're overpriced and the numbers are terrible. The cash flow is non-existent.
Yeah, you're gonna buy it like a 4 cap in the hood in Atlanta because everybody wants in, right? Or some family office that needs to deploy $100 million by the end of December needs in. Listen, if you focus on I'm not gonna say any specific cities, Columbus, Ohio as an example, or like Grand Rapids, Michigan as an example, Kalamazoo, Michigan as well, my hometown. If you look at tertiary markets, that's the play. You can not only find value, but you can also find the right cash flow for your dollar. A lot of folks will say, well, is $150, $200 a month good enough in cash flow? That's up to you. Frankly, the higher, the better. But if you go to markets where you might have to get on a flight, you might have to travel a little bit, it might be a little outside your comfort zone, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of drive time to get there, you'll still find value, but then that's where you don't have to self-manage. If you're building a portfolio, you can hire somebody. They can use the Spark Rental automated property management software. You can turn them onto that and just help you build a portfolio. Hey, man, like I said, I've done this for a little bit. But you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what I'm seeing, the tertiary. And if you feel uncomfortable saying investing in like a Grand Rapids, Michigan, or like a Columbus, Ohio, or something like that, then go secondary market. A secondary market generally is going to be 30, 45 minutes outside of a primary market. So an example of that in Atlanta, say, would be Alpharetta, Georgia. Go to Alpharetta, right? I mean, if I were to buy a home right now in Atlanta, I would not buy in Atlanta. I'd buy in Alpharetta because I can get more land for my dollar. And frankly, I want to stay away from people. And have you driven? No. Yeah, and have you driven the highways in Atlanta? They suck. Like, nobody wants to drive in traffic. I take the HOV lane. I'm one person. Like, it's my express lane through Atlanta. Like, it's nuts.
Yeah. And
anyway, those ideas.
Well, so to just build on what you just said, first of all, I agree with you 100%. And we talk quite a lot on Spark Rental about investing long distance, going where the returns are much better, GRMs are better, cap rates are better. But also it's not just about the numbers. Some of it is also about regulation, and the primary markets tend to have very anti-landlord laws, very tenant-friendly laws that make it even harder to earn consistent money as a landlord. And, sometimes people interpret that politically. Obviously this is not a political show. We're trying to get political, but
yeah, we can get political if you want to get political.
I'll do it. But it does matter. It does impact your returns as a landlord. And so I grew up in Baltimore. Most of my early career real estate investments were in Baltimore, and I had a terrible time with all of them because Baltimore has such terrible anti-landlord laws, and they've just gotten worse since then too. So I just sold my last property in Baltimore a couple weeks ago, and we broke out a bottle of champagne to celebrate. I was like, thank God, I'm done. I don't have any more Baltimore properties.
Yeah, man.
Anyway,
no, and I don't think Maryland is it's not a non-judicial state. Like Georgia's a judicial state. Illinois, for example, is not. It is a judicial state, which means you have to go through the court system if you want to evict somebody. And generally speaking, like if you even look at all what the family offices are doing and REITs and funds, they're generally buying in only non-judicial states. That means it's very business friendly for investors like you and I to go in and make the impact and the moves that we need to from an acquisition perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had a property take 11 months to evict a tenant. And when I did finally evict him, he had punched holes in every cabinet door and scratched up all the hardwood floors. And he used every trick in the book to prolong the eviction. But it took almost a year to get this guy out because he was a professional tenant. And, anyway, a bit of a tangent there.
Yeah, we could talk about that. If we wanted to go political, I think Brian would have to we'd need to devote another hour and a half to this show.
Oh yeah, easily. So we put out in our newsletter yesterday a call for some questions from the audience, what they wanted to ask you. So I've got a couple of those questions here that we picked as a random sample. So Ashley asked, and I'm going to paraphrase her a little bit just for clarity and to keep it brief, but she was basically asking, at what point should I cash out my investment properties? She says, I was an investor for 5 years. Is it okay for me to now sell my properties? So what would you say to Ashley?
Yeah, it depends on the mindset and it depends on where you are. If you have a better opportunity, if you're looking at investing in a business, then use real estate as a tool. Don't forget money and real estate as a tool. You can sell it if you want to sell it. You can keep it if you want to keep it. If you want to go buy a car, go buy a car. Like, I'm just saying, do whatever you want that's going to make you happy in the long run. But also that will have a driving impact on your dollars. That's the most important part. So if you have, say, a portfolio of 5 or a portfolio of 10 single family rentals, Ashley, for example, but you're seeing a business opportunity where if you invest $100,000, then you'll make $150,000 or $200,000 a year in a 2-year time frame. Hell yeah, do that deal. You're not going to do that in a real estate deal. No. There's no way, unless you buy super distressed, you raise the capex on a large multifamily, you won't even be able to 1031 because it's not like kind exchange, but like maybe you can roll over some profits, maybe even do a OZ, qualified property acquisition in a qualified OZ fund. Maybe you can get away with that. But listen, if you have a better opportunity where your money is making more money, then do that. If you I look at my SFR portfolio on an annual basis and I say, what's the bottom 5%? And can I tolerate the bottom 5%? If I can't tolerate the bottom 5%, I'm going to move it into another business that I'm going to buy. It's that simple. Like, I show no emotion when making these decisions. It's never emotional. It is only logical, because you work hard for your money. Your money should be working harder than you do for it.
Yeah, I mean, these are investments. This is not your home, right? I mean, these are just investments. There should be no emotion in it whatsoever. So,
yeah,
great answer. All right, we have a question from Brandon, who says, "What's the best way to structure my real estate investing business? Should I have a holding company and be incorporating each property?" He says it affects financing options and also relates to liabilities. So, what are your thoughts for Brandon?
Sure, Brandon. I would look into either a Delaware or Wyoming LLC from the protection and just being anonymous perspective. Both Delaware and Wyoming are great if you want to stay anonymous. It helps with overall asset protection. That then should have a controlling interest in the individual entities that you set up in the states in which you're buying properties. One property per LLC. If your CPA says, "Hey, it's going to be an accounting nightmare," screw your CPA and go find somebody else. Like, say, "See you later." Really fire your CPA and go find another CPA that actually understands how to do basic accounting. Like, it's not hard, right? Like, it's just different entities owning 10 properties instead of you owning 10 properties. The reason you want to do that, if your tenant slips and falls and knows that one entity owns 10 properties, then you're kind of screwed, because now your liability exposure has just increased by the factor of 10, assuming that all properties are equally valued to be around the same. If I'm looking at financing options, you shouldn't have an issue with financing. Like, if you're going with non-QM, non-qualified mortgage financing, they're only going to do B2B loans, which means they're only going to lend to an LLC. They're not going to lend to you personally. They will take a look at your credit experience and cash to close, but they will want to have an entity formed, unless you're going to Bank of America, Wells Fargo, in which case, why are you listening to this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to clarify. So you are not proposing a Delaware Series LLC. You're proposing having either a Wyoming or a Delaware LLC as your master legal entity, and then opening up individual LLCs for each property in the state where those properties are located.
Yes. So, example, I live in Georgia. If I want to buy 10 properties in Georgia LLC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If I want to go buy 10 properties in Alabama, my Wyoming LLC will have a controlling interest in Alabama property 1, Alabama property 2, Alabama property 3, LLC. Each of those LLCs need to have an operating agreement. They need to be registered in that particular state. They need to have an EIN, and you need to show the ownership that goes right up to the main holding entity. And that holding entity, of course, needs to have its own EIN. You need to have your own operating agreement, and you need to treat it as if it's a real entity. The problem that a lot of people make, the mistake that a lot of people make, two of them. Number one, you never set up an operating agreement. Stupid on you. Number two, if you need to have a board meeting or you need to have meeting notes that you have to take, then take them. If it's just a pass-through LLC, then you don't need any of that. One mistake a lot of folks also make is they'll just go ahead and do a straight S-Corp election for an LLC. Don't do that. The legal ramifications, like, you have to follow so many IRS guidelines if you have an S-Corp elect LLC. That could be a little bit of a challenge. So push your CPA on that. I don't think you need an S-Corp LLC until you're at least making $100,000 a year.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other mistake that a lot of real estate investors make with their LLCs is commingling funds. If you do that, you lose all of the asset protection benefits of having an LLC in the first place. So at that point, you might as well just own the properties in your own name. So do not mix your business money and your personal money.
Don't do that. And also the same applies with commingling with self-directed IRA investors. If you're a self-directed IRA investor, do not put yourself in a position where your transaction is considered prohibited. Big fines, big no-no. And from the moment that you engage in a prohibited transaction, let's say that was 5 years ago, all of the gains in your IRA until, say, year to date, the 10 years of deals that you did, guess what happens to those dollars? Bye-bye.
All right.
And you get penalized.
Yeah. So by the way, we put a link in the comments here to where you can look at some lenders who specialize in working with real estate investors, and they all lend to legal entities. So if you're worried about borrowing money as a legal entity, don't worry about it. There are plenty of lenders out there who are happy to work with you. All right, last user question. This is from David. And David says, what should I be looking for in a multifamily management company in the 50 unit plus apartment complex range? He says, I'll be investing long distance.
Okay, long distance, David, whether you're a domestic or international investor, one thing that they've done it before and they have in-house management. A lot of management companies will just be created. There's two trends. One, if you have, if you're an operator, you'll outsource your management. I don't necessarily believe that's smart. I had Joe Fairless on my radio show. This was 2.5 years ago, and he and I got into it about. Now, I love Joe. He's a fantastic guy, and what they're doing is phenomenal. But he and I got into it with outsourcing management. I think controlling every part of your supply chain matters. So if you're going to be the GP and if you're going to actually control that 50 unit apartment complex, have in-house management because you can properly affect the dollars inside of management. There are a lot of people believe that, hey, outsource this shit. If you do that, I'm going to hunt you down and I'm going to strangle you. That's something that I would absolutely look at. How do you tell a good management company from a bad one? 1, ask for references. 2, walk the properties they're managing. 3, interview their staff. If they're friendly and nice and inquisitive and they have really good energy and vibes about them, you're pretty much golden. Like, yes, you have some other due diligence you'll probably want to do. You'll want to look at the technology that they're using. Keep in mind, throughout this podcast, I've used the word technology at least 3 or 4 times. If you're kind of catching this drift here, you know, if you're not up to snuff on technology, spend a quarter. You have time between now and the end of the year. Get up to snuff with the technology you want and need to grow and scale a business. But that's one of the criteria for me, right? Like if I'm going to go buy a portfolio somewhere, I'm going to look at a management company that uses technology because I need my dashboards. Like my team will need dashboards to look at. If you're doing everything like on your phone in notes on iPhone, it's not a business. It's bullshit, right? Like how are you able to do anything? You can't scale worth anything. So that's something too. Technology, have they done it before? Get references. Do they actually have in-house management? As a management company, I've also now seen management companies outsource the management, which is so weird. It's like, why would you? But that's your business of managing properties. Why would you outsource your business of managing properties? Anyway, people drive me crazy sometimes. So if you find that happening, I would stay away.
Yeah, and I couldn't help but notice in your answer there that a lot of what you propose that people do involves being there in person, walking the properties that this company manages, speaking in person to their employees. So I thoroughly encourage people to invest out of state, invest long distance, but you are probably going to have to go and physically visit the city where you plan on investing, at least once or twice before you shell out tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars there. So anyway, just to piggyback on what you said.
It's worth it. Listen, you have zero excuse, right? Like if you wanted to spend one day in a city and you're like, Abhi, you're telling me you have to fly there? Yeah. Spirit and Frontier have less than $50 flights if you plan accordingly. 1, 2, if you get there early enough, your out-of-pocket cost is nothing to drive around because you would have the property manager pick you up at the airport, give you a tour, and drop you back off. So that's easily arranged. Number 2, they'll probably buy you lunch. If they don't buy you lunch, cool, lunch is on you. $15-20 maybe for lunch, and then a coffee to get you going throughout the afternoon. If you're like a 2 or 3 coffee kind of guy or gal, you're all in for $35 plus your $50, let's call it $100 round trip ticket. $150. Get your ass on a plane and go through the motions and go meet people. Like I'm notorious. Yeah, like I'm notorious. Sorry, one thing. I'm notorious for jumping on a plane in the morning. Now, like Brian and I know each other, I'm gonna go fly to him.
I'm not in Brazil, so
okay. Well, all right, never mind. I'll figure out. So Brazil's a country I've been dying to visit, so we'll make that happen at some point.
Yeah.
But like, let's say you lived in Miami or you lived in Orlando or you lived in Texas somewhere. Like I would fly there in the morning. I would meet you for lunch and I'd be back in Atlanta by dinner. Like invest that travel time because it shows people you're committed.
Yeah, or you can also make a weekend out of it. Take your spouse or your significant other. Take the kids. Go have a fun
Absolutely.
weekend. Make a trip out of it, and then you can write it off. So,
yeah, absolutely. And if you're thinking, well, man, I don't really have a budget for this, then you know what? Don't invest in real estate until you do. It's that simple. There are a lot of folks that will say, well, you can invest with no money down, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, okay. I mean, you'll get to the point where you can understand some of those strategies, but you need dollars to invest. You need take $20, $25, $30, $40,000 and put that money to work. Put it to work, and then have a little contingency budget, $500. Like that's what it takes. If that's what it takes, then hustle and go do what it takes. I don't like. We're so freaking lazy sometimes. Like not everybody listening. Of course, you're not lazy listening to this, but if you are lazy and you're listening to this, make some changes in your life.
All right. Well, speaking of hustling, I want to hear about what you are up to, both with your Think Realty podcast and in the other sides of your business, because you have multiple businesses going. You are an author, you are a national speaker, you are a coach, an entrepreneurship coach. So tell us about everything that you're up to.
So I have to preface this by saying I have the privilege of doing a lot because I'm surrounded by amazing teams. I can't do everything that I can do without their unconditional support. And I mean, man, like they run my life.
It's a recurring theme in this episode.
Yeah,
you need to have a team.
You need to have a team. If you think you can do it all by yourself, you just can't. So the Think Realty podcast it's great. I love doing it because we're actually going to change up the format. So Brian, I will let you know what that is, and I'll have you on the podcast in January as well. It's going to be we're changing up a little bit. Usually it's been good interviews with amazing people, but we're switching it up to be a little more controversial. Generally, I'll record the podcast once every other month, and we've got this big like LED screen behind me. It's a lot of fun, so we'll have you on. It's great. The point of that podcast is to drive home this idea that you can start here, and you can end here, and the difference is less than what you think it is. It's not this entire scary monster of an animal that we believe wealth to be. Harvard, I think it was Harvard that did a study saying all it takes is $70,000 a year for you to be happy. Now, happiness is a different definition. Many of us have different definitions of that. But generally speaking, you're not going to see a crazy increase in the quality of your life after making $70,000 or $75,000 a year. Many of you might be thinking, are you kidding, Abhi? Like I need at least $250 million in monthly recurring revenue that's coming in. No, you don't.
Okay, Warren Buffett. Yeah.
yeah. No, exactly. The second thing that I'm up to is a company called NP Hub. It's a company that I co-founded in 2017 with my really dear friend Chris Chopra. We started from nothing. We took on no investors, no angel, no equity, no partners, nothing. Zero. And today we have a team of 48 employees, half of which are offshore. I think this year we'll be doing about 3.5 million in revenue. And we use technology. 6 times we're using this, five times. We built a proprietary technology platform that helped the nursing industry. I'm a huge believer in registered nurses and nurse practitioners, and the fact that they're the first responders, and thanking them is one of the best things that I get the privilege of doing through NP Hub by helping them in their educational process. Third, I work a lot with Streamline Funding based out of Austin, Texas. They are very near and dear to my heart. I definitely do see a lot of deal flow from Streamline, but at the end of the day, they wanted to build a massive LOS, next level technology platform, which I'm helping them do. I acquire businesses. Oh God, it'd probably take me about 30 minutes to list everything. But one of my favorites right now is dental. I'm investing heavily in the dental industry, in the medical industry, because I love it. We can have an offline conversation about that, but I mean, it's one of my absolute favorite industries to take a look at. And then any SaaS platform that I find seems interesting. So Brian, are you selling Spark Rental?
Well, make me an offer. Maybe we'll see.
So, just stuff like that. But really, at the end of the day, I love having conversations with people, not to sell them anything, because, like, I don't really have anything to sell. I'm not the guy that I'm very selective about my coaching. I don't really like charging for coaching either. It's not even my thing. It's just let's go on a 10-year run together. And the last time I did that, we ended up doing fairly well financially. So that to me is a lot of fun. I'm an eternal entrepreneur. I'm always looking at stuff. I love doing deals. Yeah, we all screw up sometimes. I'm sure I've screwed up.
Part of the process.
Yeah, it's part of the process. But do things that will constantly push you outside the boundaries of your comfortability. And now the uncomfortability becomes part of the circle in which you can play. And your sandbox gets bigger and bigger. And whether it's a business that I'm buying or a piece of real estate that we're investing in, it's truly a privilege to be able to take advantage of this, knowing that the teams are in place to help me do the due diligence, ensure the right people, do the math, and then talk intelligently about it too, whether it's the financing or just my wife.
I love it. Well, so Abhi, where can people connect with you?
Yeah, guys, you can check me out if you want to check out the Think Realty podcast. thinkrealty.com/podcast. You can find me anywhere online at Abhi Golhar. I write for LinkedIn. I've been writing a lot about technology on LinkedIn recently. You can follow me. I think I'm writing 2 or 3 blogs a week on LinkedIn. I've got 1 or 2 blogs a week on my domain, just my own website, abhigolhar.com. I'm starting to rev back up on Instagram. I just lost interest because I've been just really busy on the private equity side of things over the last 2.5 years. And so I don't know. You just find me, email me. You'll find my email. It's me responding, or it'll be my team responding.
So we've put links here in the comments to thinkrealty.com/podcasts and abhigolhar.com. So Abhi, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a lot of fun. And we hope to have you back sometime soon.
Of course, you got it. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Brazil, maybe in the next couple of months. Let me see what I can swing.
Come on down. We'd be happy to have you. All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Have a good one.